we talking about practice. Not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
Welcome to the After Practice Podcast with myself, Lake Lewis. And today on the podcast, we're going to do something a little different. As you know, training camp is a couple weeks away. So what I'm trying to do now is just give you some fodder, something to talk about. And one of the things that I keep seeing on social media and on some of the other outlets is, Sam Howell not being mentioned as a quarterback that's, really worth anything but a fifth round draft pick. Well, I'm going to defute that today. I'm going to let you know why I think that the young man has a chance to lead this football team to the playoffs. Talked about it briefly on my last podcast, but today I'm going to give you some numbers and things that I think you should keep in mind in order to, elevate this football team. And I think that this young man's capable of doing that. As always, before we get into that, you can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, you name it. And you can also watch the podcast on YouTube as well as on sportsjourney.com. Sportsjourney.com going through some changes right now for the new season. But yeah, we've got a lot of good stuff going on. And then as always, you can follow me on social media on Twitter at Lake Lewis and on Instagram and Facebook at Lake Lewis Jr. Oh, and by the way, is it Threads? Yeah, I'm on there as well now at Lake Lewis Jr. So let's get right into it, folks, because I've got a few minutes for this. Sam Howell. Obviously, we know he came from North Carolina, had a really nice college career as a junior, was really on the radar for a lot of teams as a potential first-round draft pick. We know he lost a lot of the talent his second year or his, senior year, so to speak, as a starter. He had a good year. He really did. But whatever the reasons, people didn't think that he was worthy to be a first-round pick, and he actually fell to the fifth round. The Commanders actually moved up in the draft to take him. And now they're hoping that all the work that he's put in and the fact that they feel like he could be the answer at quarterback, a position that they haven't had really entrenched for, maybe a decade or more. I mean, you can go back maybe sooner than that to Kirk Cousins, but we all know Kirk Cousins wasn't the guy for this team. And there are still some fans that are mad about that to this very day. But look, we're not talking about Kirk Cousins. We're talking about Sam Howell. And what does he need to do to take this team to the playoffs? Well, I did some hard research, folks. I love numbers, love stats, things like that. If you've watched my stuff in the past, that's what I do. So that's what we're going to do today. What I tried to do was make a comparison for Sam Howell, even though it'll be his second year. Let's be honest. He's going to be a rookie this season. He had one start against the Cowboys, fared really well, threw for 167 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. And he showed pretty much every passing tree in the book. I mean, he made intermediate routes, deep balls, quick decisions, but he also had a rookie blunder, where he threw into double coverage, if not triple coverage in the red zone that cost him an interception. But for the most part, we know he fared well against the Dallas Cowboys, #1 defense. That's right. It was their top defense. It wasn't backups. They were playing for a division title going into that game against Washington in the season finale. Now, let's look ahead here. What does he need to do for Washington to be successful? Well, the number that I have for Sam Howell this year is 20 touchdowns. If he can throw for anything over 20 touchdowns, this team's going to be super dangerous. But if you look at the numbers, if you look at guys in their first year starters, and I'm not talking about the elite quarterbacks who are coming in first round, high first round picks and expected to be great. I'm talking about guys in the Sam Howell situation where you have to see to believe if he can be that guy. Well, I go back to last year. I look at a guy like Davis Mills with the Houston Texans. Look at his numbers. He threw for 17 touchdowns. Okay. Look at Justin Fields in Chicago. He threw 17 touchdowns. Those are the guys that I think right now for Sam Howell, that's your barometer. And that's not saying the barometer's low, but let's face it, he's not going to be like Patrick Mahomes and throw for 40 touchdowns. He's not going to be like Josh Allen and throw for 35 touchdowns. That's not what's happening. And that's what those guys posted last year. But see, I think the thing that's going to separate him from, say, like a Davis Mills or a Justin Fields, at least for this upcoming season, is that he's inheriting already a top 10 defense. Washington's defense ranked 7th in the NFL last year. So he's going to be in a position to play with the defense that should be able to get him the ball. The defense for the Commanders went out and drafted, Emmanuel Forbes to be a turnover machine as a corner. They also picked up Quez Martin. They also brought in some other guys to fill the void in the secondary as far as lack of turnovers. Derek Forrest, a guy last year that was creating havoc, creating turnovers. And now you also get a healthy Chase Young back. The defense should be even better. You get Fedarian Mathis as well, was a top draft pick a year ago that got hurt. He's back. So the defense should be better, which means that Sam Howell and the offense will have the football more often than not. The other thing that I think we have to keep in mind, which is the reason why I'm high on Sam Howell as far as being able to produce 20 touchdowns or more, is because he's got an adequate play caller. You look at Eric Bieniemy and the track record coming from Andy Reid, whether he called the plays or not in Kansas City, he still was part of that offensive brain trust. He's going to bring that and put his own wrinkle on the offense, and guys are already talking about how much of a difference that they see. By the way, Sam Howell has more weapons around him than a Davis Mills did last year, than a Justin Fields did last year. So he's already got a couple things going for him. He's got a better defense than those two teams had, and those two quarterbacks threw for 17 touchdowns with really no super big time playmakers around him. I know Brandon Cooks was in Houston at the time, and now he's in Dallas, but Brandon Cooks has been a really good professional wide receiver, really good. At one point when he was with the Rams, when he was younger, he was very good. But now we're talking about a guy that's kind of moved around over the past several seasons. With that being said, you look at Washington's, playmakers. You start with Terry McLaurin, Pro Bowl receiver. And then on the opposite side of him, you have Jahan Dotson, who's got that kind of ability and capability. And a lot of people think that ultimately, when their careers are done, Jahan Dotson could be just as good as Terry McLaurin. And that's not knocking Terry because he's great, but they think that the guy opposite him could be great as well. And then you sprinkle in a guy like Curtis Samuel, Swiss Army knife, you can see three offensive playmakers at the wide receiver position that those other teams didn't have. Collectively, I'm going to put my money and say this. The Bears receivers last year plus the Houston Texans receivers still weren't better than the three in Washington. Now you look at the running back position for Washington. Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson. You draft a kid, Rodriguez, out of Kentucky. So now you've got a couple of guys there that you can get the ball to out the backfield, and those guys can catch too. So Sam Howell is coming into a situation where he's going to get his first start as the entrenched starter to start, because we all know it's going to be him and not Jacoby Brissett, who's really good. But we all know Jacoby Brissett, what he's been over his career. He's a guy that's groomed and aided other younger guys to get ready to be the starter. That's what's happened. And I think that's clearly what the plan is in Washington. If he beats out Sam Howell, great. But I think we all know Sam Howell's going to be the quarterback in Washington, barring a disastrous preseason. Okay. He would have to stink it up for training camp and for preseason not to get that. So let's look at the numbers again. 20 or more touchdowns for Sam Howell. My number for him right now is 20. If you go back 2 years ago, Taylor Heinicke, when he started for the 2021 season, he started 15 out of 16 games. He had 20 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Okay. 20 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Oh, by the way, they did not make the playoffs. So again, didn't have the same kind of talent, offensive talent around. And I know people are going to say, what are you talking about? They just brought in Jahan Dotson. That's the only difference. Wrong. You didn't have Brian Robinson. You didn't have Jahan Dotson. You didn't have Curtis Samuels then. So Curtis Samuels was here, but he was hurt. So now you have all these guys on the field. And another thing, you might have a healthy Logan Thomas this year. Logan Thomas came back from that injury where last year he just wasn't the same player that he was the year before, when I said before the injury that he should have made the Pro Bowl over Evan Ingram, who made it when he was in New York. We all know Evan Ingram now is with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Washington's got the talent. But if you look at the quarterback play of where they've been, let's just look at here. I got some numbers here in front of me. You go back to last year, if you're the Washington Commanders at quarterback play, you have to think collectively it wasn't getting done. That's just the way it was. It was not getting done. Last year for Washington, as far as quarterback play, Taylor Heinicke, 12 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Carson Wentz, 11 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So you do the math. That's 23 and 13, 23 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Oh, by the way, Sam Howell put his touchdown and interception in there. You've got 24 touchdowns, 24 interceptions, folks. Okay. If collectively that was the final straw with this offense, okay, let's just say that was their numbers because that's what they produced. 24 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. If I asked you right now to sign up Sam Howell for 24 touchdowns and 14 interceptions on the year, would you sign up for that? Listen, you guys know I love you, but I'm telling you right now, I would venture to say 70% of you would sign up for that number right now. I know you would. If he can produce 24 touchdowns and have 14 interceptions, that means they're going to win some games. That means the offense is going to move the ball. And the difference this time would be the offensive play calling. If you go back to last year, we talked about those 4 or 5 games that if there was adequate offensive play calling, they would have won those football games. They could have easily beat the Minnesota Vikings. They should have beat Cleveland. You look at the Giants games, it was just horrific play calling. And if that game was managed properly, that could have been 4 more wins for a team that did not have an entrenched franchise caliber quarterback in play. So now what I'm saying is Sam Howell the franchise caliber quarterback? I'm not saying he is, but what I'm saying is he's got every opportunity to be. He's got a chance to do something this year if he can just play steady football. For me, again, 20 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 21-22, gravy on the top, because I know that they're going to run the ball. I know that they're going to spread the ball around and get guys open in space. Those numbers don't sound like much, but if you look at the comps to the other players that we talked about, the Justin Fields of the world, 17 touchdowns last year. If you look at Davis Mills, 17 touchdowns last year. Again, those are the guys that I think right now, just for a Sam Howell, because those guys did have some success. They didn't have a lot, but they were also in situations too where things could have been better. Justin Fields, we all knew, needed more talent. They went out and got a receiver now to help him. They went out and got some kid from Carolina who's from Maryland, to really help their offense. So again, Washington, though, has way more offensive talent, at least on paper. We know you got to produce. And I thought last year, Terry McLaurin showed that he's one of the top young receivers in the league. Not even young anymore, just one of the top receivers, period. And then you saw Jahan Dotson, when he was healthy and on the field, he made a big difference. So if you're the Washington Commanders, you're hoping that Sam Howell gets the job done, doesn't have to light the world on fire and throw for 40 touchdowns. But if he can just give them steady play at quarterback, they're going to be a team to watch as far as a wild card berth. I think the Eagles clearly win the division, but I know the talk of Dallas not being too far off from Philly. Well, don't forget about the Giants. Don't forget about Washington, because I don't think they're too far off from Dallas. And I said that. I'm sticking to it. You can talk to me at the end of the season about this. So as always, appreciate you watching me. Appreciate you checking me out here on the After Practice Podcast. As always, you can subscribe to it on pretty much all major carriers. And you can also come watch it on YouTube and soon to be back again on sportsjourney.com. Have a good one.